Module 4, that's next. And can you believe it? We're approaching the halfway point now of the course. Now we're going to answer the third of the 6 B's of the big picture framework. In this particular one, it's called bodies. Are we going to primarily acquire new customers, or are we going to retain primarily the ones we have now? Before we dive in, it's probably a good time to stop and just think about where you are now in the big picture framework. And remember, big picture is a framework that integrates strategy and execution. It helps guide your decisions for you. And at this point, you've made some decisions around your brand and how you want to think about your entity that's going to market, the scoop, that part of the business that you're going to use as your unit of analysis. You have defined a business category, big or small. You get to choose, and you make that decision, that strategic decision, based on the parameters we discussed in the last module. Now we're going to get into this issue around bodies. Specifically, we're going to start to look at, are we going to first define what a customer actually is? It seems like a strange question, but who really is the customer? And should we grow by acquiring or retaining customers? And then we also like at this point to stop and think about the behavioral group of customers. What do we really want to build our business around? What is those behaviors that are most important to us, given the kind of strategy we want to get? You think about big picture. I like to call big picture more of a market shaping model. A lot of frameworks in marketing are what are called market takers. You look at trends and then you react to those trends. No, in big picture, we say, forget the trends. We're going to go out and make things happen the way we want them to happen. This is why companies like Apple are so successful. They tell the market and shape the market in their image of how they want things to proceed. Let's get into this issue around the bodies question. Who is a customer? Now, that may sound like a very strange question. I mean, everybody knows what a customer is, right? That's the person that walks into the store or visits you online or comes to see you. And everybody knows what a customer is. Well, that's not necessarily true. There are many ways you can define a customer. And you want to define a customer for several reasons. But guess what the most important reason is? You want to define a customer in a way that allows you to, number one, count them. How many are there? And 2, find them. Count them and find them. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, let me tell you a quick story about a time I changed careers and why this question became so important. Earlier in my career, I was in the transportation business. I worked for a large, major global airline in marketing and strategy. And so the way we defined customers was around people that had a propensity to fly between 2 city pairs, between, say, New York and Los Angeles. And we also defined that even tighter around maybe the specific class of service or reason they were flying, business or leisure, coach, first class. We had different definitions around a customer. And by defining it that way, we're able to quickly assess just how many of them are there and where are they? How do we find them? Now, I changed industries and I went from an airline business to the healthcare industry and the medical device industry. And my specific job was related to medical devices for gynecologic surgeons, gynecologists. And so gynecologists perform things like hysterectomy and other procedures in the female reproductive system. And I didn't know anything about it. I mean, and that was why they hired me, to get a fresh set of eyeballs on this, this market. And so what did I do? First thing I did is I came in and I said, let me see the list of all of the gynecologists that are out there, because I want to know how many there are. And to my surprise, the particular business unit I was in hadn't done that yet. They hadn't defined a customer in a way that allowed them to quickly assess just how many customers there are. But for me, I needed to know this very important question. Who is a customer and how many of them are there? And whenever I meet somebody in marketing, a new client or another company, I'll say to them, hey, I'll say to the marketing people, how many customers do you have? And if they don't know, I mean, think about it. If they're a marketing person and they don't know how many customers they have, I right away realize that we're not dealing with somebody that's a very strong marketer. The best marketers know the answer to that question, even in the roughest of terms, millions or hundreds of thousands, or maybe just one. A business might have just one customer, like the U.S. government, for example. All right, so how do we define customers? Well, you can define them around their behaviors, especially their purchase behaviors, how frequently they buy, what they pay, how they shop, where they go for their information, do they shop online, what do they click, etc. We can also look at not their behaviors, but their beliefs, especially around brand commitment. How knowledgeable are they of the brand? So a brand like Peloton, the people that are loyal to Peloton know all about the brand, and they're very loyal to it. And they don't want anything to do with the competitive products that are out there. And so you define, in this case, a customer around the degree of knowledge that they have around that brand. And I'll talk more about that later. So takeaway from this slide is you start by defining a customer. So you can first define them, and then you define them around either their behavior or their beliefs, or a combination of the two. Very empowering when you do that. Now, ideally, you're looking for a definition that creates customers that are of high value to you and you're of high value to them. It's a two-way win-win type of relationship. And so look at this little chart over here to the side, and it defines on one axis the customer value to the firm, what we call their customer lifetime value, like putting a price on their head, so to speak. But on this axis, the vertical axis, we define the firm's value to the customer. How valuable are you to them? And if you do this right, the ideal relationship is one where everybody wins. You're extremely valuable to them. They're extremely valuable to you. I look at one of my relationships. I'm very loyal to Delta Airlines. I use them all the time. I'm also of very high value to them. I'm in their top tier loyalty program, the 360 program. And so it's a win-win. No question, that's an ideal relationship. Now, at the other end of the extreme is the unhappy couples, right? A brand that you're not happy with. By the way, they're not real happy with you. You're just not buying enough from them. And then we have these kind of other quadrants where you have what we would call the hostages. You're of high value to them, but kind of low value to the customer. So, for example, a cell phone company, you might be very high valuable to them, but you could switch cell phone companies anytime. You're not real loyal to them, or cable companies, something like that. And then you have the other extreme where you have a brand that's extremely valuable to the customer, but they don't buy a lot for it. They don't show a lot of love for it. They're getting a free ride, so to speak. Now, these four quadrants, don't confuse these with the big picture for go-to-market strategies. It's a completely different way to just express how we think about customer value to us and our value to the customer. Another good tool that you'll have at your disposal in this course, one I recommend, is this. It's a matrix that lets you think about the question this way. Customers are sometimes complex in the fact that there's not just one person. So look at a purchase like a family car for the teenager. You're buying a car for your teenager. Let's say she's going to college. And that purchase has multiple stakeholders involved. There is, for example, the decision maker. Who is it that makes a decision on the car that the teenager will drive and use at college? Well, it's not the dad, it's not the teenager, it's the mom. Of course. But the payor, the person that pays the bill, is probably the dad, or the major breadwinner in the family. The direct user, of course, is the teenager. She's the driver. But then there are what we call some indirect people involved in this. People that are repairing the car or servicing it, or influencers like her friends or relatives or neighbors and things like that. Social media influencers. It's complex. It's a multi-unit decision-making unit. We call it a complex decision-making unit, customer unit. And this table lets you sort of identify them and define them in terms of their influence on the purchase decision. If you're a salesman selling a car for a teenager, who are you focusing on? Well, early on, you're focusing on mom. And then later on, you're focusing on dad. During the test drive, you're focusing on the teenager. So a good marketer sorts out this complexity with a table like this, showing their role in the purchase and their influence and how you should prioritize them in terms of your marketing efforts. Now, let's talk a little bit about customers in terms of their behavior types and how this connects back to the idea of core competence. Earlier in the course, we looked at the brand issue of core competence, the skills that we're good at. And we want to now make the connection between skills and the loyalty types. And let me discuss loyalty first. When we think about loyalty in marketing in the big picture, we try to look at it this way, that there are at least three types of loyalty as I come back and focus here. There are customers that are what we call heart loyal. They're heart loyal, meaning they're emotionally attached to the brand. They love the brand. They love it so much because it helps define sort of who they are and their identity system, etc. Then there are more what we call head loyal customers. They aren't loyal in an emotional sense, more rational. They make buying decisions based on facts, based on test drives, based on data, consumer reviews, and data that helps them make good, rational decisions. And their commitment is conditional because they just wait for the best deal to come along, the best performance for the price, and they make a decision. Whereas the hand loyal is more habitual. They're loyal, but they don't know why. They just buy the same product all the time because it's easy. They don't have to think about it. It's low involvement. Okay, so what does this mean for you in big picture? Well, what that means for you is that your brand, if it's going to attract a certain loyalty type of customer, better have certain attributes. Heart loyal customers are going to expect a quality image with a tight social community and support system. Apple users tend to be very loyal, and they like being part of the Apple tribe, the Apple family, so to speak. They talk in terms of the family approach to how they feel about the brand. Whereas the head loyal, is more around data and information. So the brand there has to be smart. It has to be able to provide data and information. It has to be able to give good data and examples of quality, testimonials and things like that. Whereas the hand loyal, that basically it's a brand that is all about convenience, availability. It's on the shelf. If a customer just wants to buy laundry detergent in that orange bottle because that's what they've always bought, it better be on the shelf when they go there, or they're going to switch over to something else. Now, how does this relate back to core competence? Well, let's look at it. Remember the three types of core competencies? Customer intimate brands are those that really build relationships, and they're good at customization, very personal service. They are a brand with high touch, totally involved and connected to that customer, the heart loyal customer. Whereas head loyal, it's all about functional performance. The thing's got to work, and it's got to work well, and it's got to be effective in every aspect of its usage. They don't want a product if something else better comes along. And we all have products that we're head loyal to. Look at insurance, for example. If you have an insurance company and another one comes along that gives the same insurance for a better price, if you're head loyal, you're going to switch. And then the hand loyal customers, they want strong operational performance. They want good logistics and supply chain. You buy something from Walmart, you buy it because you know you're going to get it. I buy products from Walmart online because I know they're going to deliver it to my outside my garage door right on time every time, and I'm satisfied with that. That's what I expect for my hand loyalty to Walmart. Now, let's go back and look now at a very important tool we use to think about this question. Remember, we're in the part of the big picture where we're thinking about the bodies we're going to go after. And the customer journey map is this way that we walk in their shoes, right? We think about how they go through the entire experience, the customer experience map or journey map. You'll hear it called different things. And as you see here, it's kind of a circular format. We think it starts with a customer first being aware that they want a particular product. Then they search for relevant alternatives to that. They try it on, test drive it, look at data. Then they buy it, use it, and ultimately they become acquired at some point. And then at some point they switch from being acquired to now retained. And that's a very important part because that's going to affect how they communicate to others about their experience. And so it's important to think about the customer journey map as a series of distinct steps that the customer engages with the brand and the category, and a good marketer manages that experience all the way through. When you're acquiring customers, it looks like this. You go through each of the steps to acquire them. And I'm going to go back here and so you can see the full map again. They create awareness, engage, make it easy for them to adopt. If you're acquiring a customer for the first time, you've got to go through a lot of the early upfront work to keep them considering your brand all the time. It's a tedious process. Acquiring new customers is much more difficult than retaining, although retaining is much more valuable in the long run. It's very, very costly to lose a customer, and that's why we focus a lot on retention. So what does retention look like? It looks like this. Here, it's more iterative innovation. They already know the product. They're not shopping for it anymore. They're just buying it routinely. And it becomes very important to remind the retained customer why they bought the brand, how smart they were to buy the brand in the first place, and how smart they are to be loyal to the brand, and reminding them of why it was good for them, because that's really going to affect their word of mouth and their continued and repetitive use of your product. So what's the difference between acquisition versus retention from an executional point of view? A lot. And this table sums it up pretty nicely. Here you see the marketing objectives of acquiring versus retaining versus the so-called 4 Ps of marketing, or the way we put it here in big picture, the solutions, the pricing that you offer, how you distribute your products, and the way you communicate and speak to them, which is what we're going to get to when we get to behaviors in Module 5, I believe it is. So here, look at each one of these. When you are offering products to acquire, you need to make sure it's easy to use, or they're not going to consider it. But once they start using the product, then they want more. They want it upgraded. They want complexity. They want more design and features. And think about things that you've bought. You buy things early on that are simple, but then as you get used to it, you like more features. Pricing is all about a low trial entry price, but over time, as they become retained, then you level out your pricing. It's more continuous. We practice continuity pricing. Distribution is about helping people understand the brand, but then later, once they're retained, it's all about service and support. You're much more selective now. Communications early in the acquisition process, it's about awareness. You're making the customer aware of the category or aware of the brand. But once they are retained, you've made them loyal now, whether heart, head, or hand. It's all about reinforcement and continuing to make them see that they were smart to consider you in the first place. Okay, that's it for Module 4. Be sure to get into your chapter in the book. Also, continue to work with your teammates on the group project. This is an excellent way for you to be practicing these concepts and applying them. And of course, stay current with the discussion board. That's where you get a lot of rich ideas and insights, your own reflections, as well as seeing the reflections of your classmates. And we'll see you in the next module here in Marketing Strategy.